This is Kim DuMont, Senior Program Officer at the William T. Grant Foundation. Two members of the Institutional Challenge Grant Selection Committee, Michael Gottfredson from the University of California, Irvine, and our President, Adam Gamoran. Also present from the Foundation are Billy Hunter and Vicente Maleve. We welcome you to today's webinar, Proposing Strategies to Foster Institutional Change. In part one of the webinar, we'll revisit the goals of the Institutional Challenge Grant and dig deep into what institutional change might look like to better support the work of research practice partnerships. We will then pause for questions. In the second half of the webinar, I will speak more about the award and application review process. I'll also share some information about who applied in 2018 and changes in 2019 to the application guide. We will then have time for another round of questions. Throughout, please send us your questions through the GoToWebinar. Also, please know that the slides and recordings from today's webinar will be posted within the next 2 weeks. Okay, let's get started. The Foundation's mission is to support research to improve the lives of young people. In pursuit of this goal, we invest our research dollars in two focus areas. Our Use of Research Evidence initiative supports studies of strategies to improve the use of research evidence in policy and practice in ways that benefit youth. Our Reducing Inequality initiative supports studies that help us understand how programs, policies, and practices reduce inequality and outcomes among young people in the United States. The Institutional Challenge Grant brings together these two focus areas. It aims to facilitate research investments that yield knowledge that's useful to decision makers and research that's used in ways that improve outcomes for young people. But this is no easy task, and there's considerable distance between research, policy, practice, and youth outcomes. Too often, policymakers and practitioners' ideas fail to shape research agendas. Too often, researchers lack incentives to undertake research to inform policy and practice. And too often, the capacity is lacking to bridge these gaps. Resources are needed to establish more effective ways of working. The Institutional Challenge Grant was designed to address these barriers. The grant encourages research institutions to build sustained research practice partnerships with public agencies or nonprofit organizations, to have the partnerships pursue a joint research agenda to reduce inequality in youth outcomes, to create institutional change to value research practice partnerships and their work, and to develop both partners' capacity to collaborate and to produce and use high-quality, relevant research. While these challenges are ambitious, we believe this is what is needed to advance the production and use of research in ways that benefit youth. Now let's take a closer look at why the Foundation is supporting research practice partnerships and why we're pushing for institutional change to better value these partnerships. The Foundation defines research practice partnerships as long-term, mutually beneficial collaborations that promote the production and use of rigorous and relevant research. In other words, they adopt a long-term view, persist beyond a single project, involve relationships between institutions, not just one or two individuals, and benefit both parties. There's a growing body of empirical work that suggests these types of collaborations help researchers develop a better understanding of the local context, learn about the needs and questions of policymakers and practitioners, and provide insights that can lead to groundbreaking research. Research practice partnerships also benefit the public agency or nonprofit organization. They help policymakers and practitioners gain access to existing research, contribute to the research that's relevant to their local context, and receive assistance in their efforts to actually use the research evidence. Consistent with these ideas, the Institutional Challenge Grant encourages university-based research institutes, schools, and centers to build sustained research practice partnerships with public agencies or nonprofit organizations. The first Institutional Challenge Grant awardees demonstrate the potential for such partnerships to reduce inequality in youth outcome. For example, Cornell University and the Cooperative Extension of Tompkins County are undertaking a series of studies to learn how to disrupt connections between the opioid epidemic and poor outcomes for low-income rural youth. The University of Colorado Boulder and the Denver Public Schools are focusing on bolstering the Denver Public Schools data system in evaluating 2 programs that aim to level the quality of instructional practices within the district and in turn to reduce achievement gaps on the basis of race and ethnicity. And the University of Toronto and the Puerto Rico Department of Education are evaluating a principal management training and school consolidations as 2 potential strategies for improving students' educational experiences, their opportunities for learning, and their academic outcomes. Given the promise of this approach, the Institutional Challenge Grant application also requires a proposed plan to change policies and practices to better value these partnerships and their work. To help brainstorm about the different forms institutional change might take, it's useful to consider the efforts by the first grantees. Grantees committed to building a supportive infrastructure that assists with establishing memorandums of understanding and data sharing agreements, coaching to develop the capacity of researchers for partnering, fundraising support, and partial course releases. Another institution committed to establishing compelling incentives through a new faculty research practice partnership track. And the third is trying to change the image of a successful researcher to include those who work in research practice partnerships. Moving forward, the Foundation welcomes even bolder ideas for change. To help us think more deeply about what this might look like, 2 members of the selection committee are going to offer some reflections. Both are well qualified to offer insights. Adam Gamoran is currently the president of the William T. Grant Foundation and was previously an associate dean for research and interim dean, the director of the Wisconsin Center for Education Research, and a professor of sociology and education policy studies of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Michael Gottfredson is currently the Chancellor's Professor of Criminology, Law, and Society of the Law at University of California, Irvine, and was formerly their Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost. Mike is also the former president of the University of Oregon. Clearly, they are well positioned to give us some ideas. Thanks to both of you for joining us today. We are excited to hear your thoughts about institutional change. Adam?
Thank you, Kim. Today, universities are under attack from many directions. Some say the state of higher education is awful. Others charge universities with hoarding money. Still others argue that the cost of higher education is too expensive and that college educations don't pay off for young people who graduate. Still others are critical of what they perceive as a political bias, a liberal bent of institutions of higher learning. What can be done? How can our universities respond to demonstrate their value? Well, one approach, supporting faculty research for social impact, can be an effective counter to the criticisms. Now, in medicine and engineering, faculty are rewarded for tech transfer, the idea that innovations and inventions developed in research will be transferred into the private sector. But in the social sciences, In the social sciences, policy relevance is often met with disdain. It is time for this to change. Now, why is it that this is such a challenge for university researchers? Well, in fact, all those criticisms that I had on the previous slide about blaming higher education for being too expensive and hoarding money and having a political bias, university researchers are largely insulated from these criticisms. They are rewarded for their contributions to their academic fields. They generate knowledge for its own sake. And this is revealed in the journal articles and books that they publish. While university researchers are highly innovative when it comes to the content of research, they often show little imagination when it comes to the use of research. Indeed, universities offer little incentive when it comes to social impact of social science scholarship. Worse still, rigor and relevance in research are often seen as in opposition to one another. By rigorous research, we mean theoretically driven studies that use methods that fit the question. This is valued. But relevant research, which addresses problems in the real world, is often disrespected. This is a false dichotomy. In fact, research benefits from engagements with the problems of the real world, and I would argue research is only relevant when it is also rigorous. Because research aimed at practical problems is devalued, it is often structurally marginalized within the university. It is counted as service instead of research, and as a result, applied social science is more often found in research firms than in universities. But universities, in fact, have much to gain from addressing social problems in research. For public universities, which are charged with serving a public mission, supporting research that addresses the public good is very central to their missions. Private universities also have a responsibility to address the challenges of their communities, to engage with their own communities. Thus, research for public impact can serve the missions of both public and private universities. Now, this is not a new concept. At the University of Wisconsin, where I used to work, the Wisconsin idea is over 100 years old. This was the notion that the boundaries of the university are the boundaries of the state, and university researchers have responsibilities to address the challenges faced in the state and communities. Now, recently, the Wisconsin idea has come under attack as some regard the purpose of the university to prepare laborers for the workforce. We may be seeing a new resurgence of the Wisconsin idea today in light of changes in leadership. Another example is Rice University, a private university in Houston, Texas, which has taken up engage Houston and empower its success as one of its core pillars of its mission. As an example, the Houston Education Research Consortium at Rice University is a partnership with the local school district. This partnership addresses the challenges of the local population. They've issued over 25 reports on the situation in the school district that inform local decision making. This consortium is valued not only for its public impact research, but also because it has attracted philanthropic dollars from civic-minded allies in Houston itself. So these are some examples of how universities have benefited from supporting research in the public good. Now, what can universities do to change their institutional structure and incentives to support social impact research? Well, they can provide teaching releases for faculty who participate in partnerships, or summer salary for faculty who collaborate with external partners on research. Universities might also reconsider how research contributions are judged in career advancement decisions. They can consider applied research as research and not service. And just as we now measure the contributions of research to further research, we can consider the impact of research on policy and practice. For example, we can measure these contributions. We can obtain quantitative measures, just as we now obtain measures of how often research is cited in other research studies. We could obtain quantitative measures of how often research is cited in the mass media, print or social media, or in legislative deliberations. And just as we now solicit testimonials from research experts on whether a piece of research influenced subsequent research, we could solicit testimonials from policy leaders or practitioners to indicate how a piece of research had influenced their judgment or their decision making or shaped their understanding of the challenges they faced. Pursuing social impact by harnessing the talent and knowledge of faculty is the key to the future of universities. To meet this challenge, faculty will need to become more engaged in responding to real-world problems. Universities can help them do so by reorienting their incentives. This is not to diminish theory-driven, internationally recognized studies, which will and should continue, but it is to enhance the visibility of work that meets the challenges of today. And the Institutional Challenge Grant at the William T. Grant Foundation can help drive this change. And now I'll turn it over to Mike Gottfredson. Mike?
Thank you, Adam. Good afternoon. And first, on behalf of the selection committee, I want to thank all of our attendees to the webinar for your interest. The selection committee enthusiastically appreciates all of your efforts, and we want to let you know how supportive we are of this program by the Foundation, a program designed to enable and facilitate and reward partnership scholarship at research universities. That's a commitment that all of the selection committee members share, and we're very enthusiastic about this program, and we're enthusiastic about your participation in it, and are really mindful of the effort and work that it takes to participate in a program like this, and we're grateful for it. And we pledge to you that we will take your solicitations your applications very seriously and with great diligence. Wanted to speak a moment and reinforce some of the comments that Adam made about the institutional change component of this program. It really is, in many ways, a distinguishing feature of this particular grant program. It's a key element and an essential feature that the selection committee will be looking for in the applications. And to further some of the discussion that Adam has raised, in thinking about what institutional change means in this program and to the selection committee, we would like to focus your attention on your own institution in terms of the proposals that will be prepared, and ask what are the obstacles in your own institution that serve as barriers to fully engaging in the kind of partnership research and partnership scholarship that the program is designed to address. This is an analytical question that would ask you to, in looking at your own institution, to identify what it is that stands in the way to furthering an interest by faculty in this kind of scholarship, and what would facilitate this kind of research in your own institution, in the policies or maybe the practices of your own institution. What could be done to enhance the research in this regard, or to bring more researchers to the table with respect to the incentives or the policies of the institution? And then to ask, how are these obstacles engaged in the proposal itself? With what level of commitment and enthusiasm from key actors, or with respect to key policies, key financial aspects of your own university? as they can be identified in the proposal. Is there evidence now of institutional concern and commitment that can be cited within the institution? In keeping in mind the institutional change component, I think it's important to think of the kind of change that this grant proposal is interested in effectuating. It's structural change, really, and that's what we mean by institutional change. What could be enduring? What could provide real incentives in the way that faculty and researchers actually do their work and engage the institution that could enhance the prestige of this research within the institution or the rewards in the institution in an enduring way. That is a way that would be designed to be sustained after the period of the grant is over. So I thought it might be useful to all of you is to think about issues that have been raised in previous cycles of the grant period, and to make some observations about things that the selection committee saw as being more competitive in proposals, and some things that the selection committee saw as being perhaps less competitive, and to identify those and even for some discussion. So I think in the more competitive proposals, the institutional change component is clearly a significant idea in the proposal itself. The change component is. There's a real commitment from the institution that's tangible, and also one that's plausible. And as I mentioned, and as Adam mentioned, the idea of an institutional change is one that would likely extend beyond the period of grant should it be a successful change. There's some examples that come to mind. In previous proposals, proposals have looked to do a review of the university's tenure and promotion guidelines, a serious review that includes partnership members, perhaps, and certainly includes, in part, the question of fully crediting this form of scholarship, as Adam mentioned, not as service component to the obligations of a faculty member, but how does it get credited in terms of the work that faculty do as scholarship? New forms of faculty positions have been proposed, thought about, that have partnership scholarship as the central focus of that type of position within the university. But positions which employ the same forms of compensation, the same forms of review, and same forms of continuing appointments as otherwise regular tenure eligible faculty positions would have. There have been proposals that create and fund clearly an institutional element within the institution, one that's designed to continue, centers, for example, and that those centers are supported financially and in other ways by the partnership research, or that support partnership research, rather, and are intended to be institutional elements within the university. Programs that fully affiliate the partnership program with the university research community, provide support with structural elements that may perhaps be currently within the university that can be identified, and research that programs that fully embed the partners both within the university and in the agency within each other's institutional structure, that look as though they will be sustained and lasting, and create a program of research, again, that endures beyond the period of the project. So ongoing mechanisms within the university that encourage, facilitate, enable, support, and value this form of scholarship have been elements that were attractive to the selection committee. On the other hand, some less competitive proposals, ideas that seem to be more suggestive of relatively weak institutional commitments without the kind of institutional change that this program is designed to enable. We might point to rather standard letters of support from university research organizational leaders, letters that we know and we see that are say my office from a provost or vice president for research is fully supportive of this kind of research without really a tangible suggestion of how that support might be realized within the period of the proposal and beyond. Statements is this research is consistent with the mission of the university to provide service to the community and the like. Proposals say we'll allow course release as indicative of our support, or we'll allow a service component to be credited to the principal investigators. We'll ensure this partnership is fully credited to the service obligation. That's, I think, particularly telling statement that actually doesn't really recognize what this proposal is designed to recognize, and Adam so clearly specified that this is research in the meaning of research for research universities, and scholarship in the meaning of scholarship for research universities. And also research projects that don't really signify that this is really research, so that the design questions that are important for proper scientific inference are not particularly adequately addressed. So there's some ideas, Adam, that sort of, I think have come out of previous proposal cycles that may be helpful to the attendees.
Mike, thank you so much for your remarks. And now we'd like to open it up to questions. And you can ask your questions by typing them into the question box on the webinar screen.
Adam, and Mike, we have one question for you already. There seems to be, perhaps superficially, at least a bit of a discrepancy in Adam. You're acknowledging that perhaps course releases might be one way to think about institutional change, and Mike describing that this isn't enough to be a competitive application. Can the two of you say a little more about how we might reconcile that apparent difference?
Kim.
Sure. Maybe. Oh, sorry, but I could speak to that. Well,
go ahead, Mike.
I was alluding to course release that is funded by the grant as being not a particularly strong commitment from the institution, but should the institution recognize the importance of the research as part of its own commitment, that might be a stronger signal.
Thanks, Mike. Exactly. I was speaking about university building in a mechanism to allow course release to encourage faculty members to participate in this kind of partnership-oriented work in the context of this grant, but more broadly as an indicator of institutional change.
We have another great question that has come in, and it's actually one that was given considerable attention by the selection committee during this last round, was how does the selection committee handle changes that a university has already made to move in this direction of better supporting research practice partnerships? How is that evaluated within the proposal?
Well, Kim and listener, I'm really glad you raised that question because it reflects a dilemma that the selection committee faces. Our goal is to encourage and support universities that are trying to change their practices to be more engaged and to support social impact research. And so we're always looking for what is the value added of this grant? In what way does this grant help facilitate this change? Now, on the one hand, a university that's already undertaking this change without our funding, there's not a lot of value added. On the other hand, we do want the grant to recognize and bring visibility to universities that are exemplary in the way they engage with their communities, support faculty who are undertaking partnership-oriented research. So I think a university that has already made strides in this direction will be in strong position to compete for the Institutional Challenge grant, but they need to signal what the value added of the grant is.
Great.
I might also add to Adam's comments that this program is looking for models that can be useful to other research universities. And so participation in this kind of research is celebrated by the selection committee, and an effort to identify those things that have been undertaken at research university that could serve as models and how they might be generalizable to other research universities would be an important aspect.
Great. I think that's, was there one more question, Ed?
Yes, we have a question about whether a medical school can apply to create a research center of excellence to work in partnership with a major clinical health delivery system. So Kim is going to talk in a little bit about the specifics of the details, eligibility requirements, but I want to emphasize that the focus of the research needs to be on reducing inequality in youth outcomes, where youth are aged 5 to 25, and that the two sides of the partnership need to be a university on one side and an independent nonprofit or public agency on the other. So I guess the answer to the question was maybe yes, maybe no, but those are the criteria.
Great.
And I should add that any questions we don't get to in the webinar, we will either answer individually
through follow-up,
or we will add to the FAQs for the Institutional Challenge Grant.
Great. I have one more question I'd like to tend to before we move on. And this comes, well, we've been talking a lot about the institutional change on the university side. And someone's wondering, what's the benefit of this award to the policy or practice side? And so, Adam, you want to start? I can add on, or?
Sure. That's a fantastic and really important question. This webinar was established to emphasize the institutional change part of the application process. But that is only one of 4 key elements of the application and of the purpose of the grant. So the purpose of the grant is to establish a partnership and carry out the research, to build capacity in the partner to use evidence in its decision making, and to create institutional change within the university. We have found through 2 cycles that was the latter piece that was the most challenging for applicants, and that's why that's the focus of this webinar. But all of the elements are of equal importance in evaluating the applications. As far as benefits for the public agency or a nonprofit, the idea is that this is a partnership where questions being asked in the research are ones whose answers would improve the work of the public agency or nonprofit. So is it a school district that wants to know if their programs are working? Is it a child welfare agency that wants to know, is it reaching their population, and are the services it's providing effective at improving circumstances for our most vulnerable children? These are the kinds of questions that our public agencies and private nonprofits are struggling with, and we're trying to marshal the intellectual power and research productivity of our universities in the service of those kinds of answers. Kim?
Great. I wanted to just add, in addition to Adam's good comments, that while not a requirement of the proposal that the research questions come from the policy or practice space, it does happen. It's supposed to be a jointly developed research agenda, but it does happen that the winners of the Institutional Challenge Grant so far, the research questions that have been put on the table, have all initiated in the policy or practice space, and really making sure that the research and the resources that are created through this grant are benefiting the policy or practice side. So, and Mike, unless you have something you want to add, I think we'll move on to the second part of the webinar.
Nope, very good. Let's move on.
Wonderful. Now let's turn our attention to the award and application review process and learn a little more about who applied for the second year of the competition and what's new for year 3. The Institutional Challenge Grant provides $650,000 for 3 years, with the possibility of a 2-year funded renewal to solidify the partnership, the institutional change, the research, and most importantly, the efforts to reduce inequality. The monies within the grant map closely to the goals of the program. There's up to 9 months of support for a joint planning period. This is really intended to refine the research agenda, the selection of fellows, and the partnership agreements. We have learned that it's not the best place to leave too much for the planning period, that you have to work through a lot of details before submitting the award. There's also funds for the partnership to conduct research to reduce inequality in youth outcomes, as we just discussed. Funding for the equivalent of 1 full-time mid-career fellow per year for 2 years. Resources to support activities that develop both partners' capacities, and an indirect cost allowance of up to 15%. All of these costs and the indirect total $650,000. In addition to funding from the foundation, the research institution must contribute the equivalent of 1 full-time fellow for 1 year. This can be paid through in-kind contributions like course buyouts or through other grant funding. As you develop your application, please keep in mind the foundation's aspirations for the award. At the end of the 5 years, 3 years through the initial grant, and hopefully 2 years through a renewal, we expect the research institution will have established a set of strategies that facilitate sustained research partnerships with public agencies or nonprofit organizations, that the public agency or nonprofit organization will have increased its capacity to use research evidence, that participating researchers have improved their ability and skills to partner, and that the research generated has been used in decision-making and is likely to lead to improved outcomes for youth. Applications for the Institutional Challenge Grant are due this year, September 6th, and they include the full proposal and all agreements and statements of support. There are no letters of inquiry for this competition. Once submitted, senior staff review the 4-page structured abstract. This abstract is a critical component of the application, and at this stage in the process, other materials are only reviewed as needed. The structured abstract mirrors closely the 4 goals of the award. Applications that fit with the foundation's interest and have been responsive to the call for proposal are then moved on to the selection committee. Once in the selection committee's hands, 2 committee members are assigned to each proposals who conduct an in-depth review of the entire proposals, and these reviews are eventually shared with the applicant. In addition, the proposals that receive the highest rankings are deliberated in a selection committee meeting. These deliberations again rely heavily on the structured abstract, as it's simply not possible for every committee member to read every full proposal. Lastly, the selection committee then selects 3 finalist partnerships. Those finalists provide a written response to reviewer feedback and attend an in-person interview at the foundation, with 1 partnership being recommended to our Board of Trustees for funding. You may be wondering who's on that selection committee. The selection committee is comprised of individuals who have held a variety of professional roles, including university professors, provosts, center directors, leaders of state and local agencies, and researchers and practitioners who are actively engaged in partnerships. They also represent a diverse range of interests, including education, mental health, justice, and child welfare. And they vary in their experiences in working with public and private research institutions. Each is accomplished in their area. They're an excited and supportive group of individuals who want you to succeed. Before moving on to learn what's new for this year's competition, we thought it might be helpful to know a little bit about the partnerships that applied in 2018. We received 20 applications from partnerships that vary considerably in their stage of maturity, from relatively new partnerships to those who have worked together for more than a decade. Most of the proposed partners, though, entered the competition at least knowing each other through earlier project-based work. The applying partnerships also proposed work in a variety of areas related to youth, including education, work in the community, issues challenging children of immigrants, and work in the justice and child welfare spaces. And 1/4 of the partnerships were led by a researcher of color, and an even greater percent were led by a team where there was at least one person of color. Applications were fairly dispersed across the U.S., and we welcome additional application from those areas not represented. The 2018 competition also engaged applications from more public than private institutions. But as Adam noted earlier, both public and private universities have reasons to strive for greater social impact, and we hope to see more balanced representation in the year ahead. You may also be wondering why there's 2 stars in this diagram rather than 1 if we only make 1 award a year. And I'm very pleased to report that there was an unexpected development in this year's competition, and the Spencer Foundation committed funds so that we could jointly make 2 awards this round, bringing our total 3 to 3. Next year, though, we anticipate a single award again. With regards to updates to the 2019 program, the program remains unchanged. We are keeping our focus on university-based research institutes, schools, or centers, are committed to supporting partnerships to pursue research agendas about reducing inequality, and continue to encourage institutional change. But we also worked with our selection committee to consider changes we might make to the application guide so that folks better understand our issues and so that we build a more robust pool of application. While the guide remains largely the same, we did make a few changes. These include brief descriptions of each of the first 3 grantees, an updated statement of the Foundation's focus on reducing inequality, more details about the selection criteria for the research plans, and ideas for addressing the tension between engaging stakeholders very seriously and in an ongoing way and presenting a well-developed research plan at the time that you submit the proposal. Before we finish up, I want to quickly highlight some of the criteria that will be used to select finalists, and you can find the full list in the application guide. First, all proposals need to provide a compelling plan for building a sustained research practice partnership. The partnership, it must be one that must endure beyond the award. The plan for partnering needs to demonstrate mastery of the literature on partnering to promote research use. And we encourage applications to read papers by Cynthia Coburn and Larry Palinkas as starter points for your developing these plans. These have been offered to you as a resource attached to today's webinar. There must also be evidence of the public agency or nonprofit's commitment to the partnerships and to use research. Here, work supported by the Foundation on the use of research evidence and grantees' writings may be helpful. With regards to the research agenda to reduce inequalities in youth outcome, it's worth noting that the research questions and findings must significantly advance the public agency or nonprofit organization's efforts to reduce inequality. And I think this is very clear in the 3 examples that have already been funded. The project must employ high-quality methods that are consistent with the project's goal and offer a detailed analysis plan. Further, the applicant must demonstrate that the research plan is realistic. Building on the ideas you heard today and the work your institutions already have underway, applicants must address the important issue of institutional change. Reviewers will want to see, as Mike described, a thoughtful discussion of potential obstacles that may limit participations in research practice partnerships. But don't stop there. The selection committee also wants to see a plan for overcoming these obstacles, some of which will be accomplished during the terms of the award. The plan needs to include assurances that the research institution will alter policies or enact new practices to attract, support, and reward strong investigators to conduct partnership research. We encourage applicants to submit customized letters that propose bold but feasible plans. Today's webinar offers a good starting point for imagining the change possible. The success of the partnership will also depend on the capacity of both partners to collaborate, produce, and use high-quality research. Applicants should include a rubric for selecting fellows that have the requisite skills to carry out the proposed work. In addition, the application must offer a plan for increasing the capacity of the nonprofit or public agency to use research in decision-making to improve youth outcome. And as a reminder, all fellows must be mid-career. The specifics of this are described in detail in the guide. We recognize that we're asking a lot and have worked hard to develop a number of resources to assist with the process. I encourage you to visit the Foundation's website and to read and reread the application guide. In addition to the ideas discussed today, the application guide includes many more specifics about the process for applying and selection criteria. The website also houses a number of other resources. We revisit these every year to evolve with the program. I do want to point your attention to one example. We recently updated an area of our website devoted to research practice partnerships. This space now includes tips and samples for building and sustaining partnerships, establishing MOUs and data sharing agreements, and products from actual research practice partnerships in education, child welfare, justice, mental health. I encourage you to check it out. Lastly, I want to state that we encourage proposals from teams with persons of color in leadership roles, either as the project's principal investigator from the university or as the lead from the public agency or nonprofit organization. We welcome partnerships across a range of domains, including child welfare, mental health, housing, justice, education, and others. And resubmissions are welcome. Please use the feedback from a prior year to submit an even stronger application. Now let's spend our remaining time together answering some of your questions.
Great. We'll try to answer as many of the questions as we can. Mike, if you're still on the line, we've got a question that you might take up.
Sure.
It's about interdisciplinarity. What would the selection committee think of? How does the selection committee value interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary programs of research in applications?
Well, I think we value it very strongly. It's, I think we all know that the complexity of the problems that we're interested in, the foundation is interested in, really presuppose the participation of folks with expertise from a variety of disciplines. So very much welcome it.
Thank you. Kim, I'm going to give you some rapid fire questions, okay?
Okay.
All right.
We'll see how I do,
First,
Adam.
can the institution have one PI and several co-PIs from across schools within the university?
Absolutely.
Are institutions who are affiliated with members of the selection committee eligible to apply?
Yes, they are. What would happen is during the selection committee's deliberations and in the review assignment, we would recuse the selection committee member who is an affiliate from considering and deliberating about that proposal.
Thank you. And are universities allowed to submit more than one application?
Absolutely, but you must recognize that since there's one award, you are essentially competing against each other within the same institution.
And I'll take this one. What is our definition of a research institution? It's a university, and typically applications come from centers, institutes, colleges, schools, and departments within universities. How many applications did we have in the past? We had about 40 applications in 2017 and 21 applications in 2018. Let's see, here's one that okay, I'm done with the rapid fire.
Okay.
All right, now here's one that may take a little more thought. Kim, I'm going to give this one to you. Can you clarify whether more of the emphasis is on the partnerships and ability to execute a significant research agenda, or on a specific one or two research questions? In other words, should the applicants be thinking about identifying specific questions that will be addressed in the research, or on building an agenda for research?
So the idea with the Institutional Challenge Grant was to think longer term. The notion here that some of the good work that's done by partnerships happens well into their relationship. So you're both within the application to lay out a research agenda that has a longer term view, and to propose some initial or one or two initial projects that will be done during the terms of the award. So I'd say you need to be clear about both.
Thank you. Kim, could you say more about what is meant by the principal investigator versus what is a fellow?
Sure. So the principal investigator is the person who is responsible for the entire grant, who will lead the effort. When we initially laid out this award, we were thinking that person would be someone who had considerable influence over at the university to bring about the kinds of institutional change that is sought from the award. And the fellow would be someone who is intimately involved in carrying out the work. And so we saw those as slightly different career stage. As it's played out, there's been some hybrids, but that was our initial intention.
Okay, Mike, here's a tougher one, so I'm going to give it to you.
Okay.
How does the selection committee think about, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to disrespect you there, Kim. No disrespect intended. Okay, over to you, Mike.
Sure.
How does the selection committee think about the relationship between the research plan in the proposal and the institutional change? How should those two be connected?
Well, I think the research plan is evaluated in large part in terms of the quality of the design, ordinary social scientific behavioral science criteria. The institutional change component is more difficult, of course, to evaluate in those terms, but the plausibility of it is really kind of the central focus, I think, of the selection committee.
Great. I'm going to answer two very quick questions. One is, will the slides from today be posted? And the answer to that is yes. Please check back in a week or two at the latest. They'll be up by then. The second one is, can people apply for multiple funding mechanisms at the same time? And the answer to that is yes as well. Adam, there is another question that people are wondering whether an application for a partnership that focuses on a city or a particular locale would compete as well as one that focuses on a larger region or is maybe more national in its orientation.
I think there's no a priori decision or stance on whether a more locally place-based focus of the partnership is stronger or weaker than a regional focus. I think the key criteria or key considerations to take into account when you're making this decision is, what is the strength of the partnership and potential for the partnership to develop in its strength over time? On the one hand, one could imagine that a more focused, locally oriented partnership would have an advantage in developing relationships between the agency and the university. On the other hand, a more regionally based partnership may have more scope and may have more ultimate impact in the long term if it is reaching more people. So I think there are pros and cons either way. The key criteria is about the strength of the partnership and the value added of the grant funding.
Great. If I may, I would like to ask one related question that a number of people have raised, which is, how does the selection committee, and Mike, you should chime in as well, think about a university that's partnered with multiple nonprofit organizations. And so the partnership's not just, or there might be 3 or 4 organizations involved in the partnership.
So my sense is we have not ruled out that kind of arrangement. I think it would be a challenge for the applicant to clarify the specific nature of the partnership, the roles, the leadership of the partnership, and make it clear how the partnership will build the capacity of those multiple partners to use evidence from research in their decision making. If the application can pull that off, it could be very competitive.
Great.
Mike?
Yeah, and I think that one of the key questions would be, do each of the agencies focus on the key focus of the foundation and this program, which is inequality and youth?
Great. And I think we'll maybe wrap up with another question or two. One that's very easy to answer, so I'll take that one. Is how are the grant funds distributed? Do they go directly to the university? Are they given to each partner? And the way that we've structured the award is the university submits and has the principal investigator. They are awarded the funds. And what folks have done is use a subcontract within that application to move funds through to the partner organization that's a public agency or nonprofit.
Yeah, another applicant, potential applicant has asked what we mean by youth inequality. Is this about racial inequalities or other bases of inequality such as disability eligible? So in our materials, if you look at our website, you'll see that we've called out racial and ethnic inequality, inequality on the basis of income or socioeconomic status, and inequality on the basis of immigrant origin or language minority status as particular areas of concern. However, we remain open to proposal applications that propose to reduce inequality along other dimensions based on a strong argument about the importance of that dimension and the ability to address it through research.
Great. I think I would just like to highlight one last question, which is there are a lot of questions coming in about the mid-career fellows and the eligibility, and these are really handled best offline. We have in our FAQs, and perhaps we'll extend it based on the questions we have here, some of those specific qualifications that people would like about the fellows, rather than try to address them all on this call.
Yes, and of course the first thing to consult is the application guide. The 2019 application guide was posted yesterday. It's available for you to see now, and that's certainly the place to start.
Great.
As well as the resources that Kim highlighted during her remarks and the handouts that are attached to the webinar.
Great. So I think we will wrap up there, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. As you can see, the members of the selection committee, the board of trustees, and everyone here at the foundation are very excited about the Institutional Challenge Grant and the opportunities that it creates, the novel and creative thinking it welcomes, and the opportunity for really meaningful change. So we invite you to share your good ideas, your bold ideas with us and challenge our thinking. And we look forward to reading your applications. Have a great day.